19th and 20th centuries, a ridiculously inhumane concept started gaining grounds across Europe. One built on violating the very concept of human nature. Human zoos, or so-called ethnological expositions, were showcases where people, mostly of African or other exotic descents, were held in captivity to show to rich, paying onlookers in their primitive or natural forms. However, one man stood out, Mr. X. Now this man put an end to this monstrous practice and banned it altogether. He was an avid animal lover, ridiculously loyal to the people he cared about, and even became a vegetarian so as to not harm animals. He was also an anti-smoking activist. Do we get the basic picture of this person? But each action has an equal and opposite reaction. Mr. Y, on the other hand, owned slaves, was an adulterer, had 2 wives at the same time, and was known to be extremely ruthless and unforgiving. From all this, we can infer that Mr. X is a good person and Mr. Y is not, right? Now you must be thinking, oh, that's so obvious. Why is this guy talking about it up on stage? Well, let me tell you the real names of Mr. X and Y. Mr. Y was Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States of America, and the man who led them victorious through World War II. And Mr. X was a certain dictator more famously, or rather infamously known as Adolf Hitler. Let that sink in for a moment. Now that I have everyone's attention, let me guide you through a paradox that has echoed across the annals of time. A paradox that reminds us of the complexity of human nature. None so good that he has no fault, none so wicked that he is worth naught. Basically, every individual, no matter how virtuous or depraved they may be, possesses a spectrum of qualities that define their humanity, messed up or not. To truly understand this, we must first acknowledge the weirdness of human nature. We all have our virtues and vices, strengths and weaknesses, moments of brilliance and, let's just call them learning opportunities. The ability for good and evil to coexist within us makes us both extraordinary and deeply flawed creatures. Let us consider the example of Adolf Hitler as stated earlier. Hitler, responsible for the Holocaust and unimaginable suffering, is rightly cited as the epitome of evil. But he was also a charismatic speaker and a brilliant artist. His ability to sway the masses reveals an unsettling truth that even the darkest of souls may possess some qualities that aren't entirely devoid of merit. On the flip side, we find people who are considered virtuous but have their own imperfections. Take Mahatma Gandhi, revered for his moral leadership and non-violent resistance. However, his life was as complex as a plate of spaghetti, with twists and turns that challenged the very notion of straightforward goodness. One of his most contentious actions was his stance of racial segregation in South Africa. Early writings suggest an extremely prejudiced view against black South Africans, which is in stark contrast to his later teachings of equality and justice. I mean, this just goes to show that even people we may admire can harbor some flaws and inconsistencies. Conversely, we find people who are often condemned, but not entirely without value. Consider Al Capone, gangster extraordinaire. Responsible for numerous crimes and violence, he was indeed wicked. Yet, during the Great Depression, he funded soup kitchens across the nation, which earned him some measure of gratitude from the hungry, needy, and impoverished communities. Now, I'm not saying this redeems him of his criminal activities, but it just goes to show the complexity of an individual's character. And also how everyone loves soup, even if they're evil, because soup is good. I mean, just look at it. An entire meal in liquefied form. What's not to like? Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. This paradox of human nature teaches us that the world isn't black or white, but in fact is filled with shades of grey and splashes of red, green, blue, yellow, pink, purple, so many vibrant colors. Times change, people change, but one thing is constant. Every action has a consequence, whether it may be good or bad, it doesn't matter. For example, during the time of the Vikings, if you were to kill someone, you would be rewarded with a first-class ticket to Valhalla, their heaven, and promised a feast with the gods. But today, if you were to kill someone, you are looked down upon, punished severely with lifelong sentences, or even capital punishment in some countries. So basically, you're punishing murder with even more murder. I mean, that's just crazy, right? Now, who's to say that this won't change again in the near future? Which is why we need to stay prepared and stand steadfast in front of each and every consequence that would possibly come our way. It's like the world is just pizza with pineapples on top of it. Or in plain words, weird. I mean, it's as if we're living in some sort of fictional novel, because there's no way this place is real, right? Individuals like Hitler, Gandhi, Capone, they don't need to fit into boxes of absolute good or absolute evil, but in fact, into those boxes that are simply labeled as humans. Because that's what we are. Imperfect creatures striving for perfection, yet failing miserably. But you know where the danger lies? It lies in oversimplifying people, dismissing their positive aspects when they err and ignoring their flaws when they excel. When we see people as entirely good or entirely wicked, we fail to acknowledge their complex workings and qualities and experiences, interests, life lessons, struggles, everything that has made them the person they are today. Consider the story of redemption and change. People who have committed heinous deeds have later gone on to transform their lives through introspection, rehabilitation, and even peer pressure in some cases. Now, should we forever label these people as wicked and not acknowledge the capacity for growth and change? Of course not. In conclusion, none so good that he has no faults, none so wicked that he is worth not, teaches us to look beyond the surface, to embrace the uniqueness of every individual and to resist the urge to hastily judge them. In a world filled with both inspiring heroes and deeply flawed villains, let us remember that each of us carries our own unique bundle of virtues and vices. That we are humans after all. By embracing this fact and extending empathy towards others, we can move towards a more compassionate and understanding society where we recognize the potential for growth, redemption, and transformation in every individual. What I'll leave you with is a thought that I feel this whole concept ultimately boils down to. That people aren't black or white, and personalities are fractal. I would like to end with these words: balderdash, gobbledygook, and tomfoolery. This is TanayMukherji signing off.